Snow fell like ashes from a silent sky the day they called him a failure. The wind howled through the frozen trees, slicing through worn fabric and wounded pride, as a once-decorated Navy SEAL stood outside his in-laws' warm, glowing home with his twin daughters clutching his hands. He had faced gunfire, darkness, and death without flinching. But nothing had prepared him for the cruelty of family. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of love to overcome humiliation, take a moment right now to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that no storm lasts forever. His name was Daniel Harper. Years ago, Daniel had been the kind of man others followed without hesitation. As a Navy SEAL, he had led missions in hostile territories, carrying the weight of his team's lives on his shoulders. He had learned to survive on little sleep, to endure unbearable cold, and to silence fear. But when he returned home after his final deployment, he faced a different kind of battlefield. His wife, Emily, had died suddenly from an undiagnosed heart condition while he was overseas. By the time he got back, the funeral was over. The house they had built together felt like a museum of memories. And the only reason he didn't collapse completely were his twin daughters, Lily and Ava, barely 5 years old at the time, clinging to him as if he were the last stable thing in their crumbling world. Grief is heavy. It seeps into everything. Daniel tried to keep working, but the nightmares intensified. The military eventually discharged him with honors, but honor didn't pay medical bills. It didn't silence the panic attacks. It didn't fill the empty seat at the dinner table. Without steady income and with mounting therapy costs, he lost the house within a year. Pride kept him from asking for help at first. He sold furniture, then his truck. Finally, all that remained were 2 duffel bags, a few photographs, and a German shepherd named Rex, his retired service dog who had saved his life more than once in combat. Rex had been more than a military asset. He had been Daniel's shadow, trained to detect explosives and danger long before humans sensed it. But after retirement, Rex became something even greater, a silent guardian to 2 grieving little girls. When Daniel woke up gasping from nightmares, Rex nudged him back to reality. When Lily cried for her mother, Rex rested his head on her lap. When Ava was too afraid to sleep alone, Rex lay across the doorway like a living shield. They moved from shelters to motels, then eventually to an abandoned wooden cabin deep in the woods on the outskirts of town. The cabin had once belonged to Emily's grandfather, long forgotten and crumbling, but at least it had walls and a roof. Snow leaked through cracks. The fireplace smoked more than it warmed. But it was theirs, or at least it felt that way. Emily's parents, however, saw it differently. They had never approved of Daniel. To them, he was reckless, unstable, a man who chose war over security. They lived comfortably in a large suburban home, surrounded by polished floors and expensive art. When they discovered Daniel and the twins were living in a broken cabin, they invited them over, not out of compassion, but curiosity. The day Daniel walked up their driveway, snow crunching beneath his worn boots, Lily in a red coat and Ava in yellow holding his hands, he already sensed what awaited him. Inside, warmth greeted them, but not kindness. Emily's father's eyes scanned Daniel's faded jacket. Her mother's lips tightened at the sight of Rex's muddy paws. They offered hot chocolate to the girls, but their words toward Daniel were cold. They questioned his ability to provide. They suggested the twins would be better off living with them. They hinted that perhaps a man haunted by war should not raise children alone. Every sentence was coated in politeness yet sharpened with judgment. Daniel stood tall, absorbing each insult like incoming fire. He refused to break. He refused to let his daughters see him crumble. When they left, the twins were quiet. The humiliation hung in the air heavier than the snow clouds gathering above. Back at the cabin, Daniel knelt in front of the fireplace, staring into weak flames, wondering if he was failing the only 2 people who mattered. That night, as the storm intensified, Rex became restless. He paced near the door, whining softly, ears alert. Daniel assumed it was the wind or perhaps a deer passing by. But Rex was trained to sense more than wildlife. Around midnight, he began barking urgently, scratching at the cabin door. Daniel hesitated. The temperature had dropped dangerously low. The forest was pitch black. But Rex's behavior wasn't random. It was purposeful. Trust had once meant survival on the battlefield. Daniel grabbed a flashlight and followed. Snow reached his knees as he trudged behind Rex into the forest. The beam of light flickered across skeletal trees. The wind cut through his coat. After nearly 10 minutes, Rex stopped near a large oak partially uprooted by the storm. He began digging furiously at the base. At first, Daniel saw nothing but frozen earth. Then his flashlight caught something metallic beneath the snow. A rusted hatch, barely visible, hidden under decades of soil and roots. Confusion replaced exhaustion. He cleared more snow, revealing a heavy steel door with a corroded handle. It took all his strength to pry it open. Beneath was a narrow staircase descending into darkness. His heart pounded, not from fear but instinct. Rex stood alert at his side, calm now, as if his job was done. Daniel descended slowly, each step creaking under his weight. At the bottom, the beam of his flashlight illuminated something impossible. Rows of secured containers. Crates stamped with dates from the 1960s. Shelves lined with documents sealed in waterproof cases. And in the center, several heavy chests. Inside the first chest were gold bars. Inside the second, stacks of bearer bonds and rare certificates. Daniel's military mind tried to rationalize what he was seeing. The property had belonged to Emily's grandfather, a quiet man who had once worked as a defense contractor during the Cold War. Stories had hinted at secret projects, at government contracts, at classified research funding. But no one had imagined this. Over the next several hours, Daniel carefully inspected everything. Many documents referenced private defense investments and secured international holdings that had matured over decades. When later verified through legal channels, the combined assets were valued at nearly $500 million, forgotten, hidden, untouched. 500 million. The number didn't feel real. The next morning, Daniel contacted an attorney specializing in estate and asset recovery. The process took weeks of authentication, verification, and legal transfer. News of the discovery spread quietly through official circles before reaching Emily's parents. The same in-laws who had mocked him for being homeless arrived at the cabin with very different expressions. Shock replaced superiority. Their tone shifted from condescension to forced warmth. They spoke of family unity, of shared inheritance, of how proud Emily would have been. Daniel listened without anger. War had taught him something profound: power reveals character. He could have lashed out. He could have reminded them of every insult. Instead, he chose silence and clarity. The legal documents were clear. The cabin and all property tied to it had passed to Emily, and upon her death, to her surviving spouse and children. There was no shared claim. But something else had changed inside Daniel. Wealth did not erase grief. It did not bring Emily back. It did not undo humiliation. What it offered was opportunity. He rebuilt the cabin first, not into a mansion, but into a warm, beautiful home preserving its original spirit. He established a foundation in Emily's name dedicated to supporting homeless veterans and their families. He funded therapy programs for soldiers struggling with PTSD. He created scholarships for military children who had lost a parent in service. He refused luxury for himself beyond comfort and security for his daughters. Lily and Ava returned to school not as rich girls, but as kind ones. They volunteered at shelters their father funded. They learned the value of compassion long before they understood the scale of their inheritance. And Rex, loyal, brilliant Rex, became the quiet legend of their story. The dog who had sensed what no human had. The companion who had led them from humiliation to hope. Months later, Daniel received a handwritten letter from his father-in-law. It wasn't a request for money. It was an apology. Genuine, trembling, stripped of pride. It spoke of regret, of misjudgment, of shame for how they had treated him. Daniel read it slowly. Forgiveness is another kind of strength. He invited them to visit, not to show wealth, but to show grace. The day they returned, the snow had melted. Sunlight filtered gently through tall trees. The once broken cabin stood proud and restored. Lily and Ava ran freely across the yard, laughter echoing where silence once lived. Daniel met his in-laws at the door, not as a defeated man, but as someone who had endured and grown. No bitterness clouded his eyes. Only calm confidence. Sometimes the greatest revenge is not wealth. It is dignity. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe for more powerful stories. Your support keeps these messages alive. And before we end, I have one special request. Comment the word faith below if you believe that kindness always finds its way back. Daniel often thought about that night in the storm. About how close he had been to giving up. How humiliation can feel like the end of the road. But sometimes, the darkest forests hide the greatest treasures. Sometimes, what feels like abandonment is only a test of resilience. He had been mocked as a homeless veteran. Judged as an incapable father. Dismissed as broken. Yet he had always been the same man, brave, loyal, determined. The difference was not the money. The difference was that the world finally saw what his daughters and his dog had always known. That true wealth is measured not by what you own, but by what you protect, what you endure, and what you give back. And in the quiet of many evenings, as snow gently returned to the forest and the fireplace burned warm inside their restored home, Daniel would sit with Lily and Ava curled beside him, Rex resting at his feet, and feel something far more valuable than $500 million. Peace.